Hello, and welcome to the Living with ALS webinar series. I am Lori McFerrin with the ALS Association. As we head into the busy holiday season, it seems like the perfect time to slow down and appreciate the things and the people that matter most. So for today's webinar, we will focus on the loved ones who care for people living with ALS. We recognize that there are many types of caregivers: spouses, parents, adult children, and youth, as well as friends and siblings and so many others. We want to say, we see you. We will try to avoid giving advice, as your needs are as unique as you are. Instead, today's panel will share experiences and resources in hopes that something will resonate. We will also have the chat and the Q&A open throughout the presentations, and we'll give hopefully 30 minutes at the end to address questions and to encourage you to share your ideas, your suggestions, and ask your questions. As a reminder, today's presentation will be longer than most. We're planning to go 90 minutes to make time for good interaction. We understand if you're unable to stay with us throughout, but know that today's webinar will be recorded and will be posted to the Care Services webinar page on our website. For everyone joining today, we ask that you complete the brief survey at the end of the presentation. We want to hear how we did in meeting your expectations, but we also want to hear any ideas you have for next year's topics for the Living with ALS webinar series. Additionally, feel free to put in your name and email if you want to share your ALS story, or if you want to participate in some of our projects coming up. Now for today's presentation. We will start with two individuals who have found themselves in a caregiver role. Linda and Julia are here to represent the thousands of caregivers who support people living with ALS. We will also hear from Dr. Tracy Myers and Jackie Kelly, who are here literally in a supportive role today. They will share information and ideas that have helped others. So first, we're going to start with Linda Levine. As a recreational therapist, Linda has worked professionally with individuals who have had strokes, spinal cord injuries, and head injuries, giving her hands-on experience with wheelchairs and communication devices and those things that people are getting used to when living with ALS. For 30 years, she taught courses at San Jose State University in California and around the world. Topics include creating a meaningful life, creativity, identity, joy, and grief. For decades, she's walked by the side of heartbroken clients in grief, coaching them to find their footing in their new normal. She's inspired daily by her clients' ability to not only survive, but to thrive. And I want to share a quick quote from Linda before we bring her on. My husband, David Busek, and I have a strong, life-affirming marriage. We laugh, cry, speak our truths, yes, even the hard stuff, and are grateful for our evolving partnership. We've become activists in many aspects of the ALS movement together. Although my whole life feels like it's led to this moment of caregiving for my beloved, David and I both still struggle to juggle our roles as patient and caregiver, lovers and partners. We both work hard to remember that I too have rights, needs, and limits, even while David's ever-changing needs become more apparent. Since ALS became the uninvited guest in our lives, we've learned some things that I'd like to share. Everyone's journey is different, but still, we all have hearts that are breaking and a whole lot on our plates that we never saw coming. With that, I want to invite Linda. Welcome, Linda.
Hello, everyone. I'm really pleased to be here. I have to tell you today, when I was getting ready for this talk, I'm like, oh, what should I wear to do a talk on caregiving? And I thought, well, maybe I shouldn't wash my hair for 3 days, and maybe I should wear sweats, and maybe I shouldn't wear a bra and wear one of David's old t-shirts because sometimes that's what caregivers wear, like a lot of the time. But then I thought, no, this talk is about maintaining our identity. This is about caregivers finding themselves. So I threw on a little makeup and a scarf, and I'm here today. However, I'm not blurring my background. I'm showing in the background there sort of miles of piles because that's the truth. We got the looks good on one side, and I don't have time for that on the other side. So again, my name's Linda Levine, and my husband David is in the room and helped me work on this talk. So I want you to know there's nothing I'm going to say that is hurtful or surprising to him. And on our journey, speaking our truth is paramount. So if you're going, whoa, I can't believe she said that, know that David has supported me all the way in this journey to support caregivers. So with that, I start. I'm really delighted to be here. When I was thinking about what to say, I wanted to acknowledge that my journey is different than many. As you heard in my background, I did caregiving for others. I have a unique philosophy about everybody needs to create a meaningful life, and I preach that every day. And then here I landed. Also, for transparency, David has a slow form of ALS. So I know that some of the things I'm going to share, you're like, that's too hard. That's impossible right now. I ask you to take the best and leave the rest. And I am delighted that the next speaker, Julia, is going to share things that she's going through because our spouses are different, our stories are different, our home configurations are different. So again, there's the Linda version, the Julia version, and then all of your versions. So I was thinking about what are 4 things I wish somebody had told me at the beginning of this journey. And what I realized is I'd like to, as a caregiver, to have been encouraged to express, to ask. I'd like somebody to tell me how weird time gets when you're a caregiver, and also to encourage me to create self-care that isn't baloney, isn't just, oh, your husband has ALS, he has a terminal diagnosis, but you'll feel better if you get a manicure, right? So I'd like to share that. And those areas are spelled EATS, express, ask, time, and self-care. And I made that into EATS because that's my coping strategy when I'm not in a healthy place. I just eat and eat and eat, my drug of choice. So for me, it's important to share with you the things that have caused me to eat when I'm not doing them. Does that make sense? Great, thank you. All right, so express. What do I mean by express? Well, one is to express my needs to David. Since the day of diagnosis, we have been on different pages about what this means for us. And what I've learned is sometimes for the caregiver, the diagnosis is even more painful and terrifying than it is for the person with the diagnosis. So David has had to express to me what it's been like for him to be like, yes, I have ALS. Finally, I know what's going on. I have a plan, and I can express OMG. My husband has ALS. He's the dude who never took Tylenol, who rode crew, and now he has a terminal diagnosis. And what's going to become of me? And am I enough to do this, etc. Also, I have expressed to him that when we go to our multidisciplinary team meetings, please don't surprise me in those meetings. Please don't say some symptom that terrifies me without giving me time to process it. Tell me ahead of time so I can be present in the moment. I've had to learn to express to the caregiving team, the multidisciplinary team, because it's a It's a patient-centered model, which is awesome. But I am an equal part of this team. ALS has happened to both of us. And I need the team to say, and Linda, how is that for you? Hey, Linda, do you need anything? Hey, Linda, do you see David's progression in the same way? Okay, so lots more to say about Express, but I'm going to move on. Ask for help. None of us have ever done this before. So ask for somebody to help you find a counselor, and ask the counselor questions, because it's like shopping for a shirt. You don't have to buy the first counselor. It might not be a fit. I asked a friend to meet with me whose husband was dying of something else. And so we started meeting every 2 weeks because we already had a bond. And our goal in those sessions was to talk about how to maintain ourselves during this journey. So I asked her, and she was thrilled to be able to help me because she was years ahead of me in the journey. Ask friends for help. We have a friend who used to be a professional chef. I asked if sometimes while she's cooking, if she could cook double and just give us some of her delicious food to give me a night off from cooking, because I never cooked all the time before. David and I split it. So can she fill in a little bit? And of course she was thrilled to. And we offered to pay her for her supplies. We have a friend who's a woodworker, and we asked him to build a stand for David to lift up his chair when furniture in our home got too low for David to successfully get out of it. I've asked friends to sit with David when I'm doing errands or when I'm away on a weekend to come and stay. David is still able to have a lot of his own self-care, but he's a minute away from a fall, a head injury, doing something dangerous because I'm doing self-care. So we've had friends sleep over, and we've also tried hiring some people. That didn't work so well, but it will. We're going to keep trying. Time. Julia and I have laughed about this a lot. It's like time moves so slowly and so quickly all at the same time. You get to the end of the day and you're like, what the hell did I do all day? I am exhausted. But you didn't like win the Nobel Prize. You didn't cure cancer. You didn't make the world's best souffle. You just got you and your spouse from morning till night. And in Julia's case, a dog and kids and, the whole bit. So again, we have different life stories, but it's exhausting. And then there's time goes quickly, because the moment somebody says to your beloved, you have ALS, the clock is ticking. So David and I created a bucket list. Here it is. This is my bucket list, David's bucket list, Linda's bucket list, and our bucket list. At the beginning, realistically, I only thought of David's bucket list. Oh, David wants to get to all the states. Oh, David wants to see his nieces and nephews more frequently. And then, because he has slow-moving ALS, time is going on, and I'm like, whoa, I am aging, I am changing, and I'm going to be a long-term caregiver. So time is essential for me too. I could walk out tomorrow and get hit by a bus. Am I doing what I want to do in this life? And also, in terms of time, what fills you in your time? What fills you? So I love playing with babies, and I love being with young people. But when I ask the young people if I can babysit the babies, they're like, no, you have too much on your plate. And I'm like, give me that damn baby. That is so soothing for me. Just because I caregive in one direction does not mean I don't want to be filled by holding your baby and making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and laughing and laughing and laughing, right? Self-care. I know, boy, self-care makes you want to roll your eyes, right? So I just want to talk about a variety of ways that I do self-care, some of which may resonate with you. One of which is trying to find ways where David and I are a team because he's my beloved. Yes, I have to help with things now, but this is our time. So one of the things we've done is we've gotten involved in activism and fundraising for ALS, and we call ourselves Team Tortoise. And David has a Team Tortoise flag on his wheelchair, and we have buttons. And number one, we have pet tortoises. And number two, what we're realizing is David is able, just like our pet tortoises, to get where he wants to go at this phase slowly. It's not fast, it is slow. Time has changed, but it's a marvelous thing to be able to do that together. Another form for me of self-care is I keep a journal, and journal isn't writing for me, it's doing art. And so I was realizing I was getting a lot of migraines, and it's because I was trying to do too much in the little time I had. So this is just a day where I was exploring, how do I soar? Well, it used to be speeding up and doing it all, and now it's slowing down and getting better sleep. So those are areas of self-care for me. Also, I find the multidisciplinary team meetings really informative and also terrifying. So one of the things I do for self-care is I have a heart that I take to my meetings, and I hold it as a touchstone while the neurologist and the PT and the OT and everybody's talking, because when we're doing that functional rating scale and David is answering, even if he hasn't dropped, I know he's going to. So my anticipatory grief gets activated. Another thing I do is I try and celebrate the wins. So if I'm doing a lot of paperwork around insurance and things, I put on my crown because I feel like, kind of, is this my life? And I want to remember that I am a queen. I am an angel. I am Linda Levine, and I am living life fully. And so just having this silly little prop, or when David calls on me for the umpteenth time, sometimes I'll walk in and go, Queen's here. What would you like? Or, sorry, David. Hey, I need a please and a thank you now. And of course he wants to say those things he forgot, right? So that my queenie is helpful in that. So express, ask, time, and self-care. Make yourself a cup of tea. Take a minute for yourself and think about what it is that makes you you. Asking for all of these things is not selfish. You have a right to be your best self while filling the cups of others, not just to make you a better caregiver and not just to be the best caregiver you can be for them, but because you're you and you're amazing. And you deserve to live a beautiful life, even though you're thrown this huge challenge. Thank you.
Ah, how great was that? Thanks for getting us started and really getting us thinking about, who am I? Because none of, any of the caregivers that I have met and worked with haven't felt like that defines who they are. So thank you for getting us started. I'm going to share another slide. Let's see, we've seen that one. Whoops. Let's take a look at this one. This slide represents our second caregiver speaker today. And for those of you who were able to join us at ALS Nexus, you might remember Julia Henry. Julia participated in a panel discussion along with her husband, Mike. Julia worked in healthcare before working for the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. She became a full-time caregiver for her husband, Mike, in 2022. They have 2 children, as you can see from the pictures. SJ is 14 and Evie is 11. They live in Fort Worth, Texas. They love to spend time together, but each of them is unique, and so they like to make time for their own interests and extracurricular activities. Julia has found that being an avid reader and doing word searches is a great way to relax. So take a look at these pictures as I introduce Julia Henry. Julia, you're up.
Hello, all. Linda, that was such a great discussion, first of all. I really enjoyed everything that you said. Yes, so whenever I talked at Nexus, I talked a lot about identity and how it related to myself and my family, my husband, and being a mother. So I whenever I think about that and trying to find that one thread that is for myself, because all those different kind of identities, all those different emotions in my family that I have to try to help navigate. It's really hard to kind of, I don't say separate yourself, but just to kind of get that definition of who you are, because you are so worried about being a mom. How are they doing? And then, like Linda said, when is my husband Mike, my Mike, he is mine, right? When is he gonna need something? And what's gonna happen? So I think one thing about navigating ALS with a family, I do think it was important to definitely communicate. Ms. Linda, you talked about that, and that means also including our children, to let them know what's going on and to check in with their feelings. And they are also, I just need to give a shout out to the young caregivers, because being so young and being available to me and to Mike is super important. It goes beyond any responsibility that children should have. And so they're already kind of, trying to discover their own selves and what that means for them. And this trauma is going to help shape them in that way. And of course, it's a terrible thing, like I hate to think about. But yeah, so in regards to being a caregiver, um, with them, a lot of discussions, a lot of being patient. These are all qualities that I actually had to work on and has made me a better parent and a caregiver, is to have that patience, to be a little bit more sensitive and be more aware of other people's emotions. Because I was always more reactive, I suppose, in regards to my emotions and my impatience. And so over the last couple years, I really kind of learned how to temper that. And also kind of rediscovering or redefining what myself is, because I am in doing things that I've never done before, not just in terms of taking care of my husband in a terminal illness, but we were truly, Michael and I, like a 50-50. I worked long hours at one time. And so, like, some of the time he would be like a 75 or 80% contributor. And I'm like over here with my piddling, 30. So having to also take over some of those responsibilities that I shared with him, like our children, I would miss things for school sometimes because of my hours. He knew a lot more what was going on at school because he was home when they got home. He took them to school and he would pick them up. So I had to, over these couple years since his diagnosis and I stopped working, um, I had to really see what I was capable of and what I could do. Um, and discover, different ways to handle things. And am I strong enough to do this? Do I even have those skills to do that? And so having to learn and accept these things and have those sole responsibilities really kind of even changed me and what I considered myself. I used to feel like I would just kind of bounce along. Michael did those things. But I can't bounce anymore. Um, so being able to do those things, and then also while I'm trying to rediscover and figure out again who I am, we had been married since we were 21 and 22. So we had our little bubble. We didn't live in the same state as our family. So we were just in this bubble. We are part of a team. We even said like Team Henry, even when it was just us two, because we were by ourselves. We were Team Henry. He was in school and working. So it's really hard to kind of separate myself because we grew together. We're a unit. So it was difficult to separate myself or to begin kind of thinking of myself as this separate person apart from our unit. So a lot of that, whenever Linda talked about self-care, I'm that eye roller. And I mentioned that whenever we talked together before, I'm the self-care eye roller. And she mentioned the manicure and how we that's kind of the first thing that comes to mind for me. When every time people talk about self-care, we're like, go pamper yourself, have a day. And that's almost impossible to me. Like, how do you make time for self-care? But in trying to rediscover a person who I am separately, I came to a point where I'm like, okay, you realize kind of your limits. And I was starting to reach that limit of this is my life now. This is all I do. So I'm just a caregiver. And I was starting to like it just wasn't acceptable and my mood and it affected everything. Um so I really had to get out of my comfort zone and that meant not trying to worry so much about what am I not doing for my kids? Um or the things I don't have a chance to do with them or for them because I'm taking care of Mike. Am I okay leaving him? Am I somehow being neglectful if I go do the things that I want to do or take that time for that self-care? So I had to go out of my comfort zone when I had to think about myself and what that actually meant for me. Um, so an example was in the spring, I took shooting lessons and I had to really get up the nerve to go by myself. I don't go by myself anywhere. Even before we would go do things together or, you know, it's just usually a shared interest. So it was a big step for me to go by myself. And I was super nervous, and the instructor was like, she thought it was great. She said, people usually bring their friends, even if the friends aren't shooting. And to go by yourself that just made that just made you super cool. And I actually took that to heart. I was like, okay, yeah, I can do it. I am brave. I am awesome. I can come to a shooting range by myself. And then I was like, okay, some people are fine with this, but I've never really eaten out by myself. So I went to eat out by myself And I was like, hey, I'm just sitting here by myself. I don't have to worry about anybody, feeding anybody, making sure everybody's settled. I'm just going to sit here and eat my dinner, and I'm going to read a book while I eat, just out in public, all by myself. And these might seem like small things, but being a unit, going somewhere with everybody, like for 20 years, to really just be alone by yourself. But I read something, learn to be alone without being lonely. That is a skill that I think I'm having to learn. And I think of it as a way as kind of preparing myself for the future, because it will just be me. And I'm going to be devastated. I'm going to be so devastated whenever I lose him. I'm going to have to take care of my kids and myself. So I feel like doing this is almost, it's a self-care, and it's also a strategy to know that I can do things by myself. I'm going to be, I'm going to be frozen whenever he has to leave me, but I won't be frozen in place. I'll know who I am. I will have learned these new things about myself and what I'm capable about. And I'll be able to move forward because I have those things that I can do, that I know that I can do. And so having to separate myself from my family, from Mike, it really just takes where you know your limit, and then you got to step out of your comfort zone. And that is, I think, really just the big issue is just stepping out of your comfort zone. And it's okay to be by yourself. It's really okay to be by yourself. And yeah, I think that's the biggest thing I'm taking away is you will find what you're capable of. And Michael in the beginning told me that you are stronger than you know. And I was like, okay. And it really does just build. And you're like, I don't think I can do this anymore. I don't know how I'm going to do this, but you do. So you are strong. You can go to the shooting range and shoot firearms by yourself. So, it was, thanks, Linda. So I just, yeah, that's what I would say is be brave and, take those steps to take care of yourself.
Thank you, Julia. Absolutely be brave. Just going through the comments, and we'll get to everybody's comments later, but I just want for both Linda and Julia to appreciate people. People are already resonating with the two of you. Thank you for bringing humor. Thank you for sharing your stories. And we know that Mike and David are sharing their stories just by having the two of you here. So we appreciate that. And Julia, I love that you eye roll. I love that when we have conversations about self-care, and if any of us get too foo-foo, you're like, keep it real, because people are going to be offended if you suggest something that is not them. So self-care means different things to everybody, and I'll always remember that because of you. Thank you. Next, I'm going to introduce Dr. Tracy Myers. Dr. Myers is a clinical neuropsychologist with over 25 years of experience working with people living with neurodegenerative diseases, traumatic brain injury, and stroke. She provides neuropsychological assessments, individual and group psychotherapy, along with family and caregiver supports. She also has worked extensively with people living with mental health and addiction challenges in psychiatric clinics and hospital settings. In addition to her neuropsychological assessment and psychotherapy experience, Dr. Myers has a strong commitment to integrative medicine for mental health and leads mindfulness and self-compassion programs for groups, caregivers, and professionals in the workplace. And so in full transparency, I want you all to know that we got together about 10 minutes before the webinar today, and Dr. Myers, in true form, stepped right up and kind of walked us through a brief mindfulness practice, just so that we could all kind of bring our expectations and our anxiety down a little bit. So thank you, Tracy, for that. And I think with that, I'm going to pass it right over to you and you can share your presentation. Welcome, Dr.
Great.
Myers.
Thanks, Lori. And thank you, Linda and Julia, for your bravery and for your perspectives and humor. And I love the eye rolling too, because I'm often the recipient of it as a psychologist when I will suggest self-care practices. And yeah, it's really important to be able to feel resistant to it and to say, no, that's not what I want. Today, I am a support person here really to hear and facilitate your stories and questions. I'm going to share a little bit about a model where I work currently with many people living with ALS and their loved ones and caregivers, and a little bit about my perspective as a psychologist working with family members and people living with ALS. So I'm going to share slides. All right. So some of you may be familiar with Synapticure. I'm going to talk a little bit about the company I work with because we're supporting patients and loved ones on their journey with different neurodegenerative diseases. And as I share, I'm going to be really talking about the model that can really help with some of the mental health aspects of living with ALS, both for the person living with it and their loved ones. Because as Linda and Julia both said, it's both of you that are living with the disease. A little bit about me, neuropsychologist, individual family therapy, patient and caregiver advocate. And yeah, I always have to throw in some mindfulness and some movement helps me to regulate and also the people I work with. So I'll talk a little bit about how I integrate that in some of the work I do with people living with ALS. So a little bit about Synapticure. Essentially, and all of you know this, but it can be a very difficult journey, unnecessarily expensive, complex, and difficult. And this is a little bit about why Synapticure came into being. Lengthy travel, over 50 miles to a clinic for many people, long waiting lists. And as Linda was sharing about those intensive teams where maybe you don't have a lot of time in between those visits at the clinic, difficulty accessing your doctors at times, a lot of testing, et cetera. And it can be very challenging. And then, of course, how do you manage the home piece? So Synapticure came out of this necessity or need for another model. So Synapticure is essentially it's in all 50 states. It's a virtual care with specialists who have experience in neurodegenerative diseases. It's and I'll show you a little bit about our team model, but the neurologist is our team model ahead. And one of the key things about Synapticure is you still work with your regular neurologist. It's not like you have to give up who you're working with or your clinic, but we work together with your care team in your communities. So there's care coordination for rehab therapies, referrals to clinical trials. We're covered by most insurances, including Medicare and Medicaid. We have an insurance navigator, and we work with your team. And then there's this last piece, which is counseling and group with providers that actually know about what ALS is and how to help navigate some of the mental health challenges as well. So we were founded by a patient living with ALS, Brian Wallach. Many of you may be familiar with Brian and his wife, Sandra Abravaya. And they founded Synapticure in 2021 with this mission to expand care to people across all 50 states. And so we've been rapidly providing more and more care and expanding in addition to ALS and PLS, Parkinson's, Huntington's, Alzheimer's, and other dementias. And the key, again, is that we work closely with your providers that you already have, along with advocacy groups and health systems. So it's not like you have to choose one or the other. You can see Barack Obama and others, Brian and Sandra, have been very politically active in terms of getting earlier access to different medications, helping to make sure that people can get medications before they even go through all the difficulty with the FDA and clinical trials. Very simple if you're interested. And again, this isn't, I'll go quickly through this and then talk a little bit about what my experience has been. But you can find us online. You can access and quickly get an appointment if you're interested. As you see, you can meet with one of our neurologists and our care coordinators and see if there are supports that might be helpful for you. So that's just a little of our thing. And then our journey is pretty straightforward that once you enroll, you meet with your case coordinator, you have time with your neurologist. And this is one of the biggest things I hear is just like, sometimes people will feel like they have a very quick appointment when they go to clinic. And so with our neurologist, they give you time to really listen, to make sure that your caregiver, your loved one is there. So you can hear, as Linda said again, like, we want people to turn to you and say, and what do you think, Linda and Julia? And I think that's just vital. And then the physician becomes the person that coordinates with your outside group. And then also just to begin to think about other services you may not have had access to: genetics, behavioral health, and insurance navigation. And then there'll be monthly care coordinations. You see your neurologist typically every 2 to 3 months, but have access to them as needed for medications and other changes that you may need. And then the mental health piece, which is the part I'm super passionate about, because of course mental health concerns can be an issue for someone living with a neurodegenerative condition. And of course, mental health is also a concern for caregivers and loved ones. And so the idea that we work with you and your caregiver together, so we have a behavioral health coordinator who will talk to you and then and find out if you're interested in getting psychotherapy. And then, for me as a psychologist, I work with individuals. So I work with people living with ALS and their family and caregivers. And so that may be spouse, and it may be children, parents, et cetera. And sometimes we bring everyone in. And the work I do with people isn't just about the disease, but it's about life and parenting and finances and all the challenges of couples dynamics, right? So, we're talking about other things too that make you a whole person. Julie, I thought you did such a beautiful job of sharing, of like kind of redefining yourself and looking at some of those existential questions of who am I and what does life, mean for me now? And then I provide groups as well. At Synapticure, I've been running a mindfulness group, a self-compassion group, a meaning-centered psychotherapy group to really get some more support for people in a group format, which I think is really helpful. And we also work with the neurologist to look at medications for mental health if needed as well. So this model, collaborative care model, was developed out of the University of Washington, and it's this idea of a team approach, right? So the behavioral health care manager and the neurologist are coordinating care, and you can see on the left, the patient and caregiver are the team, right? And then we have extra supports around them that look at the mental health piece as well as the physical care. And the data is exciting. This is, for some of us who love data, I love numbers. And so this study is some of the early work from our neurologists looking at, do people that get this collaborative care model do better in terms of mental health? And the results have been really exciting. I'm going to just highlight it really quickly. On the left is the PHQ-9, which is a depression screening. And what we found is that when people come in to our services, this is the average data, they had a scale of 8, meaning that they had significant levels of depression. Caregiver, this is the patient living with ALS. And then after 4 months of care, the depression scale dropped almost 2 points. On the right is an anxiety scale, the GAD-7. And again, we see the numbers, people starting at about a 7 and going all the way down to close to a 4. So anxiety reduced over 4 months during this initial engagement with clinicians, care coordinator, and this wraparound coverage. So just in short about this model, this idea that we don't have to go far to find someone, you can see someone in your own home. You don't have to travel to see a provider or find a mental health professional that understands what ALS is and how it affects both the person living with it and the family and the caregivers. So that's a little piece of that. And that's where you can find more information about us. I just feel really fortunate because I've been able to work in many, many different states across the country with amazing people and caregivers. So I get to be inspired on a daily basis, which I feel very grateful for. And to be able to sometimes provide some ease and have some of the challenging conversations that can be difficult to have on your own. So thank you very much.
Gosh, thank you. And Dr. Myers, there are a couple of questions already in the Q&A, so take a look at that and
Sure.
And be thinking about that. But I want to get to Jackie Kelly next. Jackie is a member of our care services team in Northern Ohio. She's going to, in her supportive role, is going to address some of the resources that we know have been especially helpful to caregivers. So we want to make them available to those of you who may not know about them. A little bit about Jackie first, though. She's been a licensed social worker for more years than she wishes to say. She's been working with caregivers for about 20 years within the areas of hospice and now with the ALS Association. She is currently co-facilitating a caregiver support group and is a new class leader for powerful tools for caregivers. Welcome, Jackie. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Let me see if I can share my slides here. Oh, I think I shared the wrong, did I share the right one or the wrong one?
You did. Looks good.
It looks good. Okay. So as Lori said, my name is Jackie, and I am one of the care service coordinators here in Northern Ohio. I have been working with caregivers for over 20 years, and the insight that they have brought to me about caregiving is just incredible. I learn from every person that I work with, which I appreciate all of that knowledge so much. I'm going to talk about some of the resources that are available. And I kind of laugh because I'm probably the one to get the most eye rolls bringing some of these up. But one of the things that I'd like you to really think about with resources is to think about your resources as layers or building blocks. So it may take several of these resources to get you the foundation that you need to be caregiving the way that you want to. So as a care service coordinator, I am kind of in the middle of a lot of the things, a lot of the pieces that are going on with an ALS diagnosis. And one of the things that I try to tell people that I work with is, you don't know what you don't know. A lot of people who have that initial ALS diagnosis don't know what to ask me, don't know where to go next. They need some guidance. And so a lot of times we can be kind of that ALS specialist who can start to work with you to build a plan and to build some things. The ALS Association has staff across the United States. We have care service coordinators and managers who can help you. If you are not connected already with the ALS Association, there will be a website that we have linked that we have on our resources to help you look at who to contact in each state. The things that I think are important, that the ideas that I try to give to the people that I work with is, when you're stuck, call me. When you have a challenge that you just can't figure out what to do with that's ALS related, call me. When you realize you need that ramp now and aren't sure how to even get that started, call me. You need a clinic in your area. So those are the kind of things we encourage. These are the kind of calls and the kinds of questions that I get. Your care service coordinator also will be able to tell you what's available. They'll be able to know what are the local and national support groups, what are the local and national services, can help you figure out maybe even what some of the funding resources are in your state. Some people I have a lot of contact with when there's a lot of changes going on. Other ones, things will kind of plateau for a little while, and maybe I will have to reach out to you every 2 or 3 months to see how things are going. Education with ALS is just kind of a huge component. And what I notice is that people who are seeking that information, they tend to make better decisions about where they're going as they move ahead. They tend to have more insight, and boy, they ask a lot of questions and good questions at the clinics, which is great. Typically, when I talk with somebody, I figure out what are the things that they're looking for, what is their biggest challenge, or what's their biggest worry, and then try to get them information about that specific thing. If we tried to give you all the information at once, we're going to overwhelm you. I use our resource guides a lot. So the ALS Association developed these 11 resource guides. I would never recommend somebody to order or read all 11. It can be overwhelming. You need to pick what's good for you. But if somebody calls me and they're newly diagnosed, I might have them, read the what is ALS, or what is my new normal going to look like? And then as they call me and maybe have other needs, then I would suggest the one that's about mobility or speech or swallowing, nutrition, those kinds of things. So, you want to be careful about where you find your information. As I always say, just because it's on the internet doesn't mean it's correct. So make sure you're getting some of those good places and trustworthy websites to get some of those things. There are also webinars and videos on the ALS Association that really help even with that hands-on care if you're struggling with that. When we were putting together this panel, one of the requests that I had about what resources would you like to see was about end of life. And specifically at that time, it was a request for a checklist. If my loved one dies, what do I do? So we've included that into the resources. It's a very straightforward, simple, what do you do in the hours after? What do you do in the days after, the weeks after, the months after? And it kind of walks you through some of that. And that's such a hard topic to talk about. When you're already in the midst of all of this caregiving and the stress that adds. But end of life planning really does have a significant and valuable place in your conversations, making sure that you have all your advance directives in place. But the one I wanted to talk about specifically also is called 5 Wishes. And you may have heard of that, you may not have. Last I saw, 5 Wishes was actually a legal document in about 42 states, but it is useful in every state because what it does is it uses language that is simple and easy to understand to walk through who do I want to make decisions for me if I'm not able to make my own decisions. What kind of decisions do I want them to make for me? Do I want life-sustaining care or do I want comfort care? Do I want to be at home? Where do I want to be for these things to happen? So I think it's a great resource. Their website, which is what we have on our resource list, also has multiple other links on there about how do I start these conversations. So moving on to some of the other, we talked already about our youth and about the younger caregivers. So it was the American Association of Caregiving Youth says that there are over 5.5 million caregivers in the United States, and those are only under 18. We see a lot between 18 and about 24, 25 years old. So those are those young adults too, that I always think of when I think of younger caregivers. There are books and resources that are developed for kids through those young adults. There are some on our website for the ALS Association. They can be given to that person to read. There are some that are meant for kids and to help them understand in their language. And there's some for those young adults, maybe trying to figure out what's next with their education. It's also helpful, if they have an adult who's supporting them to read some of those to maybe see the way that the language is and how to present certain ideas and give you some also support for that. We work with a resource also called Hope Loves Company, which is specific for kids who've been impacted, kids and young adults who've been impacted by ALS. And so they are providing services up to in the early 20s. They have camps for kids. They have virtual support groups. One of my favorite things is when you register a child with the Hope Loves Company, they'll send them kind of a care package, might have a stuffed animal in it or a journal to write in, something like that. But it's kind of a way to start to make that connection. Counseling can also be very helpful. I have found many families will share with their school what is going on if their kids are of school age, and that the counselors there are very good at getting involved, or they might bring in the school psychologist to help or whatever it is. So that might be a resource that I also find works well because you're not necessarily then making additional appointments and those kind of things. It's contains someplace that feels safe for them. So getting to some of those resources for your wellness, You have to put yourself first. I found a statement when I was preparing for some of this that I really liked, and now of course I'm looking for it. Give what you can and give yourself grace for that which you cannot give. And I think you've all touched on that already so well, that, you know, we all hold ourselves to expectations and standards that we wish for our life, whether it is for our house, for our friends, for our yard, for our job, for caregiving for our children. And when you start caregiving, all of those things, you're reassessing where things are. But I also found another quote that I loved that said, feelings are like a 2-year-old. If you don't deal with them, they're going to keep demanding your attention. And I like that because it's kind of that gnawing feeling that you get. So making sure that you're taking care of yourself is very important. But I liked, and the others have already hit on it, finding those things that make you you, finding those things that fill your cup. And it's not going to be the same for everybody. And I have heard the same thing somebody else mentioned sooner. Oh, I'll come sit with John so you can go get your nails done. Well, I love to get my nails done, but that doesn't fill my cup. Release me at TJ Maxx for an hour or two uninterrupted. That might fill my cup, especially this time of year. But the nail thing isn't going to do it. But you got to figure out what works for you. And it's going to be different. Even the spirituality piece. You mentioned that one person thinks, yeah, I want to go to church. I need to participate in that to make me feel good. And another one says, to me, that means going to sit in the woods next to a stream and just do some mindfulness or some meditation. So find what's right for you. You might also need to consider some new things to try. Maybe you haven't done the mindfulness yet. Maybe that's new for you, or yoga, or any of those other kinds of things. I found some really interesting apps when I was preparing for this that kind of cue you and send you little messages on your phone to just find 5 minutes for yourself and to remind you to do this a couple times a day. And I found those very, very, I thought, helpful and interesting. But the idea behind this is that intention. It's got to be intention to do something for yourself. So if it cues you to take 5 minutes, you need to go in another room maybe, and whether it's stretching, whether it's doing some deep breathing, whether it's writing in a journal for a few minutes, whatever it is that's good for you, with the intention that this is my time. So things like changing laundry isn't going to do it. It's got to be something that's strictly about you. Counseling is another thing that can be very helpful to help people kind of work through some of this. I saw in the comments after, I'm sorry, I can't remember if it was Linda or Julia who mentioned it first, about anticipatory grief. And trying to manage that and work through some of that. But a lot of times people are having problems finding counselors, because when I say to somebody, maybe some extra support would be good, maybe some counseling, they say, how am I going to fit that into my schedule too? And I hear that as a valid concern. But I would like to let you know that we are also putting a link on there to psychologytoday.com that has a link on there that you can go to put in the area that you live in. You can look for the topics you'd like to address. You can find the counselors and the therapist who will do telehealth. And so hopefully to make that as convenient as possible so that it can slide into your schedule. And also considering what the outcome is at the end might be worth the extra effort. And peer-to-peer support. We all need that time when somebody can validate what we're feeling, what we're thinking, what we're feeling. And having somebody not then feel so isolated. So consider getting into those support groups. Many of them now are virtual, which, was one of those things the pandemic brought us. And some of them now are some places now are starting to work back into in-person groups, if that's what you like. Some people get onto different social media groups. Maybe it's a Facebook group, or maybe it's through another organization, but you just have contact with people. And it's also possible when you go to those support groups that you might find somebody that you connect with a little bit and can share and maybe swap your contact information and have contact outside of that support group. Linda mentioned about her friend who's, their situation, their diagnosis was different, but the core of what they needed was there. And so that personal connection was very beneficial. What I would love to see is if you could put in the chat, if you have found a resource that you find helpful to you, if you have found any of maybe these social media sites or a Facebook group or any of those that you have found useful, I would love to see some of that in the chat. Anything we would find useful. And then I think the next page is just starting that resource list. It's quite an extensive list. I haven't mentioned everything that was on there. And I believe the link for that will be going out with the email, Lori, if that's correct. So you'll have access to all of those things.
Thank you, Jackie. And yes, the resources that were listed today will go out in an email to everyone who registered. But again, it's just touching the surface, and it hopefully will have some things that we know that people have found benefit there. And so hopefully there's something for you as well. Before we get into some questions and get back to our panelists, I want to say, Stacy, we see you. We love our manicurists. We are not putting anybody who didn't see the comment. Stacy's just reaching out and saying, hey, I'm a manicurist. I always say, for hands that work so hard to bless others, you deserve good care of your hands. We all agree. What we're saying is that what might work for me isn't necessarily going to work for you. And so just keep that in mind. And I'm really talking to, my colleagues that we need to make sure we're giving all kinds of opportunities for people to find respite. Like Jackie said, am I going to step into the other room and just do some breathing? Am I going to go to TJ Maxx? Am I going to get my nails done? No judgment here. Just get that break that you so need. So I do want to start. I want to get to our questions quickly, but there are, I know, one or two things that we as a group really wanted to make sure we tackled today. I don't know how many kind of secondary caregivers are in our audience today, but one of the things we wanted to address is, how do we help those secondary caregivers? You're not necessarily the primary caregiver, but you want to help. You're not sure how to help, and you also don't want to step on people's toes. The last thing we want to do is alienate our primary caregivers. So I'm going to start with Dr. Myers to see if this must come up in conversations, and looking to see if you have any ideas for how somebody can approach that. How can somebody go to a family and say, how do I help? I don't know anything yet about ALS, but I love this family and want to be supportive.
Yeah, thanks, Lori. Yes, and I often hear from caregivers when they feel overstepped, someone might say, family members, a friend will say, you've got to get someone in to help, or I can do this. And I think the most important thing is being curious and open and just asking. And sometimes even, is there anything concrete I could do, and give the person a time or a date. So it's really giving the caregiver the dignity of figuring out what they would like versus imposing it. And we can do it, people do it unintentionally, but subtly, it could feel like they're getting judged. The caregiver might feel judged in some way, or just, not wanting that particular kind of help. So I think it's asking, and then accepting what that is. And the second thing is checking in. Sometimes just checking in and seeing, because needs change over time, where maybe someone didn't need that help a while ago, but following up and, checking in and seeing if they need anything now. So frequent communication, checking in and not making assumptions, I think that can be really helpful.
Great. And so let me look at our other panelists and ask, do you have suggestions? Do you have things that, there must be things that you would just happily give away, like shoveling snow, unless, of course, you love to shovel snow because it gets you that fresh air. And So, Jackie, it looks like you've come off mute. Do you want to tackle that?
Sure, just to throw in there that we also have the Care Connections, which is a link that you can get on and set up a program or set up a boy, what's the word I'm looking for? I guess you're setting up a profile for yourself. That what I like about that is that you can kind of list the things that you need help with. You can say, oh, I would love help with, maybe meal planning or meal preparation or shopping or, with the snow, maybe cleaning up leaves. And then somebody can get on there that has been invited into that group and say, you know what, I can take care of this thing. I can take care of that thing. And that way you're not personally reaching out to somebody. They don't feel like they are coming back, at you and bothering you to ask. Hopefully the task gets done. You can approve who's doing and not doing that task. So, you can make sure that it lines up right with what your expectations are. And so it might take a few things off your plate. I believe you can also assign the management of that account to somebody else. So even if it might be my family, if my sister wants to take on that role, I believe she can also take that on. And you can also put little updates in there too about maybe how things are going.
That's great. And so it does give family complete control. It's not just the community signing up and doing things, because we want to feel safe, of course. So great. Listing those things you want help with. And if it's not listed, that probably means you want to tackle that yourself. I like that. I want to, there are lots of things going on in the chat, and I want to get to many of them, but I want to, before we go to questions, one of the other things that was really important for this group, and Jackie touched on it in her presentation, but a person living with ALS and their caregiver are really advised from the very beginning, talk about what you want. So communication is really huge. Talk about what you need so there aren't any surprises. And yet the conversations, and this is probably one of the toughest, the conversation doesn't always go as far as, when my loved one with ALS passes away, what then? Literally, when they have passed now, I need a to-do list then as well, probably more than ever, is when I need some guidance as to who to call, how to tackle this. And I'm going to open it up to all of you because I know we together have talked about this some, and I want to see who feels comfortable in sharing.
It's Linda. Hi, I just wanted to say that I was a caregiver for my parents. And one of the things that was really helpful that David and I have also talked about doing is a tree where people can, a phone calling tree, so that we're blessed to have many friends and family. And there won't be enough time for me to call everybody, nor will that be my number one priority, though I certainly want to be surrounded in a cocoon of love. So setting up a tree where one person has 8 people's names, and so you kind of have a captain and then the team. And so ahead of time, we decide who will call who so that I know our whole community is made aware. And I think we would start that if David has taken a turn, or so it doesn't come as a shock. But most importantly, it lifts that responsibility off of me, except for the people that are most essential that I would call personally.
Thank you, Linda, for sharing that. And I wonder if part of the communication in the conversation can even start earlier, because boy, waiting until someone is, has taken a turn, that makes it really feel that much more real, I'm sure. So I wonder if people feel like it would be helpful if we had that telephone communication tree in case one of us were hospitalized, or I need something else. I wonder if there's almost a reason to start that communication tree before it becomes imminent that we're gonna lose our loved one.
I'm gonna say how good an idea. I really do like the tree thing. And I was thinking, you know, even if you let somebody know, there's also people on that tree, in my particular tree, who would also be grieving at the same time. So that's actually something to take in consideration. He's got a small family, and like I had mentioned in one of our earlier meetings that we actually moved from a different state and we moved back to our home state, and that was during the pandemic. So we don't have like those kinds of friends here. So also maybe that might be a little bit more difficult with the tree. We do have a group chat for the whole family. So whenever he's been in the hospital for pneumonia before. So we really just throw it in the group chat. But I do think something to consider, even on a group chat, is I've had to say, I will let you know more when I know more. Otherwise, it is dinging. It is dinging. And I'm like, I don't want to hear your dings right now. So that might be especially something to also take into consideration and to make sure you communicate that as well. That I told you, and I need you to step away now and you can have your own chat over there. So like at the same time, try not to add to any extra stress that I already have.
Absolutely. And so that's a great thing for secondary caregivers to take care of. Maybe, okay, I've let people know, be in touch with Lori and Jackie and those folks. Please just let me pay attention to my family. That's a great point. Dr. Myers, anything that
Yeah,
you're thinking of?
one of the things, and Linda, Julia, I'm sure have thoughts about this too, but you become part of these care teams, right? Your ALS clinic, or if you're at Synapticare, you've got all these providers. And then what we've seen is when a loved one passes, it can feel like this whole support system is gone, right? And so that's the importance of having some continuity afterward, like with a mental health clinician, with, some of the outside folks that you've been connecting with, so that that doesn't feel like this abrupt stop, because you've relied on them, you've developed this wonderful rapport. So I like to think about like that whole journey of who's going to support you during the ALS journey and after your loved one passes, because that's another loss. It's a double loss of losing, a trusted neurologist or a trusted social worker or a trusted caregiver that's in your house. So just thinking about that, who are my main support people now, during, and after.
That's a great point and a great reminder of a caregiver's ALS journey doesn't end when they've lost their loved one.
The other thing that seems like it comes up, and caregivers will say to me, I feel bad bringing this up, but what if, and it's things about like, what if instead of doing a home modification, we realize we need to move, but now I have to stay in that home? Like when they start having these conversations about, yes, I'm a caregiver. Yes, I need to focus on what we're doing, but also giving some thought to the after, that what, and Julia said it so bravely before when she said about preparing for when, there's a time that Mike won't be there. And being able to have those conversations is okay. And I spend a lot of times trying to tell people it's okay for you to think about those things and to think ahead, because you will have to figure out where you're going from there. And I think people feel guilty about that. And there is just no reason to. I think that is realistic, and I think that's very normal.
ALS comes with a lot of uncertainty. It makes for very difficult conversations, but if you can find trust in your partners, in the person living with ALS, as well as the caregivers, and in your care professionals, have the tough conversations. Linda said I read it in her initial intro. Yes, we even have the tough conversations, because how otherwise do you let some of that anxiety go and, really fully immerse yourself in some of the joys in life? Thank you. I know that's a tough conversation, but we all agreed that talking about the end of an ALS journey for the person living with it is something that weighs on caregivers always. And so how do we help you talk about it? I'm going to switch gears a bit, and I'm going to start tackling some of the things in Q&A and the chat. And so I'm going to first, Julie, when you were speaking, there was a chat, and it's kind of lost in the role, so I don't know exactly who it was, but it was someone who was kind of resonating with what you were saying. I'm not brave. I can't do this. And they're not even in this, I don't know how long you and Mike have been together, but their relationship is short compared to what you and Mike are doing. And I don't know if you want to just kind of reiterate some of your points about finding strength, even if it's coming from your partner.
Okay, I'd give a mute up. We've been together for 21 years. So it really is hard separating ourselves. Yeah, so in regards to getting out of your comfort zone, it was definitely, again, knowing your limit. Because I had gotten to a point, I wasn't working, I wasn't in school, and we were always doing those two things. Like that's always been a part of our life. We go to school, and we're working. So I just had found my limit that this was all I did, and it just wasn't enough for me. So Michael has been very supportive because we are very open, and these are hard conversations. Like I almost always cry every time I have to be like, hey, I can't, or, I need this or I need that. And because you feel like you're neglecting this person. But having these kind of conversations with him, I have his support, and he really does try to push me out. He has always been my number one cheerleader. Like he really has. He's my bestie. So he's still my cheerleader, and he still tries to push me out of that comfort zone. Because, otherwise we are going to freeze and we're going to get stuck in our rut, and it's going to be really hard to get out.
Absolutely. Okay, so with a relationship comes, so Mike's got these skills. He knows you well. He knows what you need to hear as well. So it sounds like you're saying this is not one-sided. Just because Mike is living with ALS doesn't mean he's not still supporting you and bringing his strengths to this relationship.
That's right. That's exactly right. That's right.
Right.
We're still very much a couple. So, yeah.
That's great to hear. Linda, do you have any thoughts? Is there anything you want to chime in on? And if not, I've got a comment for you that I bet you would love to tackle. Somebody writes, I think it's in the Q&A, and I hope that I can. Oh gosh. All right, I'm gonna have to paraphrase because it's in the chat someplace. How to tackle or how to handle those comments, the negative comments that come from people that tell me I'm not caring well enough for my loved one. And this happens, we know that. And I think Linda can help us with this.
Just to be clear, a person is asking when the caregiver is engaged in self-care, other people are saying, is David safe at home? And what are you doing?
I apologize. I didn't portray it very well. Someone outside of the person living with ALS and their primary caregiver is scrutinizing how the care is being done.
Mm-hmm. Right. yeah, I have had that question, and or it felt that way. And what I just need to do is go back to David and say, I'm feeling like so and so is judging me. I'm feeling these feelings, because the reality is it may all be in my head, and it may not even be coming from that person. Or it may truly be a comment. And I try not to put my energy in places that are negative or I don't have any control over, and I try to refocus it somewhere else. And if they have to be judgmental about my care of my sweetheart, they're being judgmental everywhere. So that's what I would do, is just like, well, more self-care needed, in fact, because that hurt.
Yeah. So two things came out of that. One, caregivers, you really don't have any more capacity to take on their worries. But Linda, in your honesty and your openness, you've said, even you have this wonderful open way about you, and you're very positive. And yet even I can struggle
Yeah.
with confidence, and am I doing enough? And so, one, the rest of us want to say you are enough, and all of you who are showing up and helping your loved ones, you are enough. But do look to those people who you love so dearly, your husband, your partners, your parents, whoever it is, and get the reassurances that you need. It's a tough job. Nobody's going to say otherwise.
People may say otherwise, but that's none of their business.
Yeah, I
Right.
love that, Linda, because and I love what you were kind of saying too, of like it's really their issue, and that how they see you
Totally.
is probably how they see others. And the other piece is sometimes they're grieving or they can't imagine how it would feel, and so it's easy to judge in that way or project because of their own fears too. So there's a lot there, and you don't have to figure any of that out. That's their stuff. So I love that idea of just letting that be theirs. That's their story, and they may have a lot of reasons why they're thinking that, but that's not for you to have to take on.
Yeah, that's great. Jackie, there's been a request for you to repeat your comment about the 2-year-old, your feelings being like a 2-year-old.
Yeah, it was feelings are like a 2-year-old. If you don't deal with them, they will keep demanding your attention.
I love that. Yeah. And I'm literally bouncing around now from question to question. Dr. Myers, I'm going to go back to you just for some clarification. I know that in the chat there were questions about, can you serve folks outside of the US?
No, unfortunately, because we're insurance based, so you do have to have US insurance and be in a US territory or state for the telehealth. And that's for licensing requirements too, because you're seeing a provider that's licensed in your state. Yeah.
Okay. And I think that probably answers the second part of the question. If the person living with ALS is outside the country, then family members cannot access Synapticure for mental health support.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you should access support. So now I'm just speaking to people who are in situations where Synapticure isn't the best. Please still reach out and get support. And if you don't know where to turn, reach out to your care services coordinator, and they're happy to help. Let's see. Deborah has a comment in here. A friend is going through a tough time now. Her husband is on hospice. She signed the DNR and is heartbroken. She is trying to figure out passwords, finances, and taxes. She thought they had more time. And I see you nodding.
Mhm.
It's tough when those things haven't been done. And so again, not because we're here to give advice, but I do want to spend the last couple of minutes probably hearing from Julia, Linda, and Dr. Myers, just on any parting kinds of thoughts. I'm sorry, and Jackie as well. Linda, do you want to start us off?
There was a question in the chat that was sent towards me, which was, how do you keep pursuing recreation and leisure when your partner or parent or whoever it is with ALS is not as they were before? Everything's harder. And I'm going to give a plug. My husband and I went to Paris often, and we took students there. And by the time he finished the book on Paris City of Cultures, it was supposed to be walking tours, and he no longer could walk them. So it became a walk and roll experience. And I just want to say that there's a lot of books and websites out there about what to think about in terms of travel, how to take an airplane ride, how do you protect your wheelchair. Just there's a lot of good advice out there about travel. And in terms of recreation, my advice would just be recreation. The word means recreation. So it's helping enliven you to do it, and you're recreating it. I mean, David used to hike to the top of mountains in a day and come back. Now he can't do that, but he can go to the top of the mountain, and we can sit and have a picnic and have the view. So if you hold on too tightly to how it was, then your hand's not opening. So I invite you to open up your hand and see what you can put in your hand versus looking at it as an empty hand, because this is the precious time the person with ALS has. This is it. And this is your time with that person. So that's what I would say is go recreate, and even recreate meaning holding hands together. I mean, some people on this call, your partners can't speak or can't move, just their eyes maybe. Watch a movie together, get in bed together, nose kisses together, whatever. And just thank you, everybody. I want to give gold stars to all the panelists and also everybody in the room, because you and we are doing a tough job. We're angels in agony, and we're doing it. And you got your big girl pants or big boy pants on, and you're going. So congratulations for all you're doing.
So great. So great. Julia, I want to hear from you too. And if you have any thoughts on this, I forgot that in amongst all of the comments, somebody had said she's working in public health. She's got 2 kids. Her job really matters to her. And so she's trying to figure out a balance. First of all, I'll say everybody needs to make their own decisions, right? You're all unique individuals. And so Julia's way doesn't mean your way or anything, but Julia, you had to make some of those decisions. So share what you're comfortable with sharing about how you go about it.
Well, you're right, Miss Lori. It's different for everybody. It's kind of weighing what you feel comfortable. I'm probably going to use words that, again, I'm saying, oh, that sound bad, but I mean, we're in a safe space, right? We're all caregivers. Giving up. I had to decide what I was okay giving up. And that was like when we moved from Georgia, where we lived, to back to our home state in Texas. What am I going to regret more? I had to go. That had to be my platform. What am I going to regret more? Because I didn't really want to leave Georgia, but our family's here, and they would want to spend more time with him. And I do really believe he gets better care here than what we would have gotten in Georgia. So it's really just kind of weighing those pros and cons for you. And I used that, what am I going to regret more? So it was already a big struggle working that full-time job and having to come home, because even when I was working, I was primary. I would have to come home after that long day, take care of him almost immediately, start dinner almost immediately. And by 7 o'clock, I'm getting him ready for bed, and I'm, and then I go to bed and have to get up and do it all over again, no matter what time you go to bed the night before. So, yeah. And actually part of me wishes I had stopped a little sooner working, because we are at that point where we can't travel without difficulty. It's starting to get a little bit more difficult. And the things we used to do together, holding hands, just like Ms. Linda said, like all those little things, I'm like, I could have spent more time doing, but I wasn't ready. I really wasn't ready to stop working. But so see my little, what do I regret more? Like didn't really work in that part, but I still had to think that way, making those big decisions. So yeah, that's kind of where I started was what am I going to regret? What will make us happy? And yeah, that's where I went.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And don't ever worry about your words. They're perfect.
Thank-
Perfect. Dr. Myers, any parting thoughts for us?
Yes, I was just thinking about self-compassion for those difficult choices. And we can judge ourselves harshly, or we can say, well, that actually just was the best I could do, and that made the most sense. And the second piece is the checking in. I love how Linda and Julia both described about checking in with their caregiver, their husbands, and then their husbands checking in with them. Your needs matter, and we have to keep checking in with each other. Their needs matter, your needs matter, and so that dance back and forth that has created these long, beautiful marriages is really important too. And then having someone to have some of the difficult conversations, sometimes a third party like a counselor or your social worker or a minister, just having someone else there to navigate those difficult conversations can be so relieving for you as the caregiver and then for your loved one too.
Thank you. And Jackie.
I think I was looking through the chat, and the one thing that caught me, just to kind of keep in mind, a couple of the couples that I work with refer to themselves as care partners. And I love that. Having that responsibility together for the care and also for managing the illness and understanding what it is. But we had a couple who one wanted to go on like a short business trip, and I've got to figure out how to make this happen. But in the meantime, she had already made plans for her own care. She was like, no, I have some responsibility to make sure I'm cared for too. And so she had already reached out to some family. So it was really kind of a 50-50 kind of thing for their care. And I think sometimes we forget to include the person who has ALS, that they are capable of doing some things that we feel like we need to take over for them.
That's perfect. That it really is a partnership, whether that person is your spouse or your parent or your friend, that it's their life, but it's your life too. And you both parties deserve a sense of self. So with that, I want to thank all of you just for your openness, for your time, for the energy. I wish you all a really wonderful holiday. We're grateful for you. We're grateful for all that you do to support this ALS community. Wishing you all well. Take care.